Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the HKIE Fire Division 13th Annual Symposium 2022. I'm Sandy Tong. It is my honor to be Master of Ceremonies of this symposium. I would like to thank you all for joining us here. In view of the recent COVID-19 situation, we put your health and safety as our first priority, and therefore we have decided to host this year's symposium online in a webinar format only. The theme of the symposium this year is Fire Safety Performance of Building Materials, after considerations and observations to the needs of the society related to fire safety. Flammability and fire resistance of building elements such as materials in facade, structural and non-structural members, building surfaces and architectural elements, active and passive fire system, etc. They all play a pivotal role in fire safety when a building or structure is subject to elevated temperature. In this symposium, latest knowledge and experience of academicians, practitioners, and regulators will be shared, and tactics of managing and minimizing risk are to be discussed. And we are very honored to have Mr. Andy Yan Kin, FSD-SM, Director of Fire Services Department, to be the guest of honor for the symposium to deliver an opening speech today. First of all, may I invite Engineer Professor Daniel Low, Chairman of the HKIE Fire Division, to deliver an welcoming speech. Engineer Professor Low, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Fire Division, I sincerely welcome you all to the Annual Symposium 2022 of the Fire Division of the Hong Kong Institution of Engineers. The theme of the symposium is Fire Safety Performance of Building Materials. We are privileged to have Mr. Yan Kin, Andy, FSD-SM, Director of Fire Services Department, to be our guest of honor and to deliver the opening address. Fire safety performance of building material is the front line and is of top priority in mitigating the fire hazard of our living environment. Not to be ignited, not to yield under fire, not to emit toxic gases or smokes, able to stop the spread of fire, etc., are among the most important properties for the safety performance. Over the years, new materials have been invented and special treatments have been devised to enhance the general performance under fire. We are pleased to have so many prominent speakers from local and overseas. I would like to take this opportunity to convey my sincere thanks to them for sharing and exchange their invaluable knowledge and experience with our fellow engineers, researchers, and professionals. I would like to express my deepest gratitude to Engineer Professor Chen Xiu Lai, the Chairman of Organizing Committee, and his team for their dedication and effort in making this symposium happen under the acute pandemic precautions. My heartfelt thanks are also given to our distinguished guests, overseas experts, speakers, and sponsors for their unfailing support to the Fire Division. But last but not the least, may I wish you all an enjoyable symposium and find it fruitful. Thank you for your participation.
Thank you, Engineer Professor Low. May I now invite our guest of honor, Mr. Andy Yan Kin, FSD-SM, Director of Fire Services Department, to deliver a keynote speech. Mr. Yan, please.
Engineer Professor Low, Engineer Professor Chen, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. First of all, a big congratulations to the Fire Division and its member of the Hong Kong Institution of Engineers for hosting this prestigious event. Thanks for having me today. I would like to thank the division for making all the arrangements to take the symposium online. For participant safety, amid the epidemic. Why I do miss the days when we could meet face-to-face at the symposium. This virtual one, on the upside, breaks the geographical boundaries to reach a much wider audience that share the same vision and passion. The Hong Kong Fire Services Department like to keep our finger on the pulse of emerging innovations and technological development in the fire engineering field to stay ahead of the challenges. This is why we have been, since more than a decade ago, close partners with the Fire Division of the HKIE, which brings together stakeholders and professionals from both the local industry and international fire arenas to foster exchange of knowledge and experience. The Fire Division is also a dedicated nurture of young engineers and students of the discipline. This year, we are happy to have taken part in the CPD training course to share the latest development in fire detection and fire alarm system standard for buildings. We also held a seminar on the promotion of wider use of standalone fire detectors in Hong Kong as part of the course. We are grateful for the Fire Division for going great lengths to enhance public safety and enrich the community of the fire engineers with inspirational events such as this one. The theme this year is Fire Safety Performance of Building Materials. This symposium prompts a timely discussion on the ways to build an even safer city, especially on the choice of building materials being used at the facade and the internal finishing of buildings. As both a regulator and firefighter, we learn a lot in local and overseas fatal incidents involving rapid fire spread over combustible building materials. Based on our experience and professional knowledge, we adopt a holistic approach in formulating fire safety requirements by using active and passive fire safety systems. Later on, my colleague, Mr. Y.K. Chiu, will share the details of this experience and our regulatory control on the use of these materials. Like you all, I'm excited to find out more from the upcoming speakers as they shed the light on this film. Before hearing from them, I would like to take this opportunity to share some of our recent experience and happenings at the Fire Services Department with a focus on fire protection. As we all know, infrastructure and mega projects are a very important element of a metropolitan city like Hong Kong. Ongoing projects include the Hong Kong International Airport 3-runway system, East Rail Line Cross Harbour extension, and the museum in West Kowloon Cultural District, Kai Tak Sports Park, and Cheung Kwan O Lam Tin Tunnel. These projects must comply with stipulated fire safety standards before they can be put into commission. And this is where we come into the picture. As a regulator, facilitator, and coordinator to oversee the fire safety aspects of these developments, we adopt a pragmatic approach to strike a balance between keeping the high standard of fire protection and facilitating the smooth construction of the project. We are involved in multi-stages of the projects. During planning and construction, we arrange high-level and working-level meetings with relevant stakeholders to resolve foreseeable technical issues, conduct site visits to monitor the work progress, and identify problems at an early stage, and provide professional advice to enable timely rectifications of irregularities fine. Later, at the FSI acceptance inspection stage, we engage sufficient manpower to facilitate inspections, which could be conducted in a flexible manner. Such practices have been brought to and intensified in our processing of construction project of the community isolation facility in the thick of fifth wave epidemic. To race against time, we process the wrecking of building plans and conduct inspection proactively and pragmatically, and along the way, make the flexible deployment of manpower and resources to make sure everything was on schedule. Eventually, the processing work was done in a matter of days, considerably shorter than it usually takes. and the facility went into service on time with fire safety standard uncompromised. Taking the experience to heart, we are set to explore ways to enhance the efficiency of pen processing and FSI acceptance inspections. We welcome professionals to work with us in that regard. As a professional engineer, you must understand fire safety of building hinge much on the knowledge and the practice of fire services installation contractors and frontline practitioners in a bid to enhance the professionalism and the performance standard of practitioners carrying out maintenance work of FSI. We launched volunteer recognition scheme for FSI technicians in August 2021. Under the scheme, eligible FSI practitioner can apply to become a recognized FSI technician after completing prerequisite trainings and assessment organized by our department and recognized training provider. Recognized technician will be listed on a register, which can be found on our website for easy verification of qualification by contractors and others. It is to be hoped that the scheme will set a higher bar for the industry and motivate practitioners further on their professional path. It will also strengthen the confidence of members of the public in their fire services providers. Ladies and gentlemen, the Hong Kong IE Fire Division has long played a key role in developing fire science and raising professionalism of fire engineers. In the years to come, the Fire Services Department will continue to work closely with the Fire Division and its members to advance fire science and encourage wider application of fire engineering to resolve fire safety issues. I'm sure that with a common goal in mind of turning vision into practice, we will be able to make Hong Kong one of the safest places to live. On that note, may I wish the symposium every success, all participants a rewarding experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yuan. Before we start our program, we would like to take this opportunity to thank all the supporting government departments and organizations. They are Development Bureau, Innovation and Technology Bureau, Transport and Housing Bureau, Architectural Services Department, Buildings Department, Civil Engineering and Development Department, Electrical and Mechanical Services Department, Fire Services Department, and Water Supplies Department, as well as our friendship organizations, including Building Services Operation and Maintenance Executives Society, China Hong Kong Fire Protection Association, Construction Industrial Council, the Association of Registered Fire Service Installation Contractors of Hong Kong Limited, the Institution of Fire Engineers Hong Kong Branch, Urban Renewal Authority. So, let's start our presentation today. We shall have 8 presentations, which will be delivered by different specialists and representatives to share and discuss their views based on our theme, Fire Safety Performance of Building Materials. Today's symposium will be divided into 4 sections, 2 sections in the morning and the other 2 sections in the afternoon. Q&A session with the speakers to continue the dialogue on the arising issues will be held at the end of AM and PM session. All of you are welcome to submit questions throughout the presentations by using the chat function on the right-hand side of the webinar. We will consolidate your questions and our speakers will address them in the panel discussion. Our event booklet is in e-format this year. All of you can download the e-booklet together with our speaker's presentation PowerPoint from the link we've sent in the reminder email. Or you can scan the QR code at the right bottom corner of the webinar page. And all CPD certificates will be sent to our participants after the symposium by email. Now let us start the first session and introduce our section chairman, Engineer Professor Daniel S.H. Low, Division Chairman of Fire Division. Professor Daniel S.H. Low obtained a Bachelor of Science in Engineering degree and a Master of Philosophy degree from the University of Hong Kong, a Doctor of Engineering degree from EMPC in Paris, Senior Cultural Research Fellowship in 2004. He is also the supervisor of the Li Ka-shing Prize of the Best PhD Thesis in 2005, World Top 2% Scientist with Greatest Citation Impact in Stanford University 2019. He is also the author of the books Finite Element Mesh Generation CRC Press in 2015, Finite Element Implementation Wiley-Blackwell 1996. After serving more than 33 years in the Department of Civil Engineering in the University of Hong Kong, Professor Low left in 2021 and joined the Hong Kong Quantum AI Laboratory as scientist consultant. I will pass the time to Professor Low. Thank you.
Thank you. Today's first paper will be delivered by our old friend, Professor Guan Yang Yu, on the topic Advanced Fire-Resistant Coating for Building Contents. Guan Hengyu is a professor from the School of Mechanical and Manufacturing Engineering at the University of New South Wales. He received his PhD in 1993 from the University of New South Wales. Currently, he is the director of the Australian Research Council Training Centre for Fire-Retardant Materials and Safety Technologies. An industrial-focused fire research center aimed to create knowledge on novel green and durable fire-retardant materials, advanced fire models for urban and built environments, fire-suppressed technology, and new flammability tests for compliance with the safety standard. Professor Yu is a leading expert in fire safety engineering and has pioneered innovative application of computational modeling across a diverse range of engineering fields, including multi-phase flow and molecular dynamics. He has authored over 350 publications. His main field of interest are computational fluid dynamics, numerical heat and mass transfer, combustion radiation heat transfer, soot formation and oxidation, solid pyrolysis in fire modeling, and functional fire retardant materials. Please join me to welcome Professor Yu.
My name is Professor Guan Yu. I'm a professor of mechanical engineering at University New South Wales, and I'm also the center director for the ARC Fire Training Center for Fire Safety. Today's presentation, which I'm going to deliver, is to look at some of the work that we carry out in our training center, which we are focused on developing advanced fire resistance coating for building contents. And strictly speaking, we'll cover two main areas of this presentation, which is looking at the development of a lightweight fire resistant coating and comparing to some of the existing coatings that are around, as a coating. And also we'll look at some of the developments using advanced numerical approaches to characterize polymer degradation and chemical decompositions. Firstly, when we look at development of lightweight fire resistant coating, this was inspired actually from the work that I carried out with my colleague, Dr. Anthony Yuen, where we were asked by the Fire Rescue New South Wales firefighters to look at a case of an HKIE facility fire, which resulted with 14 casualties, 14 fatalities actually. The reason why I mentioned casualties in the first place is because initially they were still alive when this incident happened, but a week after that, because of the toxic inhalation, they eventually passed away, which was a very sad occasion during the time. And we were asked to actually try to simulate the flame propagation in a typical room that can be viewed in this slide here. And this, the photograph on the top left-hand corner basically represent the typical layout, and then the bottom one basically looking at just the aftermath of the fire itself. And what we could see from this investigation is that we recognize the flammability of the contents within the room themselves, and most of the contents are actually made out of polymers. So this, then we started looking at actually how, why polyurethane is so flammable, and we chose this material as the material to see whether we can flame proof it. So polyurethane foam, okay, is widely used, in a lot of, a lot of building settings, and it's typically found in all our houses. Why is it used? It's because there's a lot of desirable properties like superior tensile strength, compression strength, impact resistance, and also it has the softness that comes along with the material. As you can see that, it is, typically the material in chairs, wall insulation, and even walls and ceiling as well. But polyurethane foam has a lot of issues. Basically, it's highly flammable, and it ignites at a very low temperature. You're talking about roughly between 180 degrees to 200 degrees here, it will ignite. So the risk is that if you have sufficient of these materials present in your homes or office spaces, and if one of these material burns, and if you have sufficient amount of these materials being present in that internal space, you could cause a rapid fire spread. And because of the rapid fire spread, it could actually result in a lot of gases being emitted in the form of carbon monoxide. And we do know as well is that with polyurethane, it does emit hydrogen cyanide in some, in some quantities as well. So the issue here is that whether we can flame-proof this material, and one way to go about it is actually to introduce flame retardants into polyurethane foam. And one of the benchmark benchmark fire testing, to actually assess this flammability is actually using the cone calorimeter. And I'll be revisiting a lot of the cone calorimeter environments because it is a very suitable test to look at the time to ignition. You can actually assess the heat release rate, the total heat release rate, the smoke release, and even the gases releases as well. And basically, we follow the Austrian standard, okay, AS/NZS 3837 for testing and smoke release haze from materials. And also we assess a lot of our development, which is the coating of the foams using the cone calorimeter. So let us look at some of the ways that people have tried to flame-proof polyurethanes. So one of the ways is that we look at actually infusing, some of the phosphorus-containing polyol is a chemical compound which is very rich in phosphorus into the polymer matrix. So some of the materials that have been basically infused with the polyol, okay, through the transesterification process is listed in the slide here. So the question beckons is that how is the performance, okay, by the introduction of this normal phosphorus containing polyol? As you can see, without the polyol itself, right, the peak heat release rate is 321. But with the addition of more and more phosphorus containing polyol, okay, right, the heat release rate reduces, quite marginally to 243, 44, and 272. So you can see that the peak heat release rate, there's a 25% reduction, okay, which gives us sort of an indication is that the introduction of phosphorus-based flame retardant could be a very effective way to actually flame-proof polyurethane. There are others, introduction of other types of phosphorus-containing polyol like DOPO, which is very common, right? And it does reduce with at least 20% reduction in the peak heat release rate. Nevertheless, the fire safety performance remains not very significant because a 20% reduction appears is that the material will still burst into flames, and it's just a matter of just retarding and not suppressing the flame spread that could happen. And also, by infusing some of these flame retardants in the polymer matrix, okay, the original content of the material is actually reduced. So give you an example that in a pristine polyurethane foam, you have 100% of this material. If you take out 20% and replace with the 20% of the flame retardant, right, a lot of the mechanical properties are actually lost. And this is actually demonstrated, by some of the testings that we have carried out. And also, some of these flame retardant being introduced are not environmental friendly. So for example, they do contain a lot of halogen or even bromide containing compounds as well. So the question here is that, could we introduce flame retardant with minimal influence on the polyurethane? The question is, yes, we can. For example, that we could take the original foam itself and we apply a coating. And the coating can be realized either by spray, spin, sputtering, or chemical vapor decomposition. Another common approach that actually is also being introduced is looking at the layering approach, which is called layer by layer assembly. So we basically try to apply multiple layers of different concentration of flame retardants onto the polymer surface. So effectively, when we look at how we can carry out this layer by layer assembly, basically what happened here is that the original material or the substrate is polycation. So basically what we try to do is to activate the surface of the polymer in order that it can attract, okay, the flame retardant compounds onto the surface, right? And basically what it is done here is that by introducing, for example, a negative ion, okay, onto the surface, you can now basically attract a lot of positive ions, flame retardants, and subsequently you can attract the negative ion, which is all will be attracted to each other to form a very, very durable layer. So that's basically the whole principle of a layer by layer assembly. Now, this is one example where, we look at actually the layer by layer approach using organic compounds, for example, like chitosan, alginate, chitosan, sodium, or aluminum, or bauxite, which is bromide, or vermiculate, which is VMT. Okay, what this figure demonstrates is that it can reduce the peak heat release rate, but the total heat release rate and the total are not really reduced significantly. All right, it can also reduce the peak heat release rate and smoke release rate, but the cons, basically the disadvantage at the end is the significant weight gain due to this material. So a weight gain of basically 5, 7, or even 10% will actually incur significant additional weight to the polymer. So the question here is that there is still quite a number of research gap looking at flame resistant performances of fully organic flame retardants. Okay, so the weight gain, okay, by incorporating these coatings, okay, is still a considerable factor. Okay, there are still limited studies reporting the suppression of the toxic gases such as carbon monoxide or even hydrogen cyanide, as I've alluded to in the beginning of my presentation. And the cone calorimetric experiment cannot represent the full burning of the material in a full room environment, for example, the flash phenomena in nursing home. But before we even reach to the point where we can actually try to predict a full room environment, we must look at actually how we can actually flammable the materials and then do a systematic assessment and then derive some useful data for a predictive model, for example, using CFD, in order that we can then predict the full-blown flame spreading behavior in a full room environment. So the objectives that we have set out, to actually develop a lightweight fire-resistant coating is basically through the route of a hybrid flame retardant. Okay, it has a number of advantages because some inorganic compounds which we have discovered recently, right? Okay, are very, very effective as a flame retardant. And the other goal that we also try to manage here is to ensure that we will be using organic compounds that be environmental friendly, that is not harmful to the environment. Okay, and the next step we make sure is that whether we could apply minimal layers of this hybrid coating so that it has negligible influence on the polyurethane foam structure. So in some ways that it still retain their original mechanical properties as well. And then what we have done then is that based on this development, we rigorously test all these materials on a hybrid PR, PUF. And then we also try to extract some of the data for a computational predictive model. So the material that we have discovered lately that could actually produce a lightweight fire resistant is MXene. So what is MXene? That's the question being asked. So MXene is a new family of graphite 2D transition metal carbides, all right? So basically it's always produced at the exfoliation of the max phase. The beauty of this material is basically has a thickness around 1 to 2 nanometer, and it's a 2D sheet of roughly around, you're talking about a size of 5 nanometer, of a couple of nanometers, right? And what we have found is that MXene has a very superior fire retardant performance, and also it has other functionalities like a good thermal and electrical conductance as well. So it's really a multifunctional material. And as we explore or try to, look at what other organic compounds that can be complementary to MXene, we have found is that we can use chitosan, which is basically an extract from prawn shell, right? And also looking at even other other nano compounds, for example, in terms of VMT is vermiculate, or even MMT is monovermiculate as well. So basically what this table tried to demonstrate here is that you can see that from the introduction of chitosan and basically MMT, the weight gain is only 3.3%, but the peak heat release rate reduction and the smoke release rate is actually quite significant. So this gives us the idea then is that there is a possibility if we can use chitosan as basically the cross-linker or to bind basically the 2D nanosheets based on MXene. So what we have done here is that the MXene here that we've chosen here is basically in its raw form is a titanium aluminum carbide. And basically through immersing in acidic solutions, okay, the aluminum sheets in between the titanium and carbide is etched out and then is exfoliated through liquid exfoliation, and then it will result in a Ti3C2 nanosheets, right? And that is basically the 2D nanosheets that we will be using as a flame retardant in a layer-by-layer approach. And what we have done here is that, again, as I demonstrate the layer-by-layer approach, is that we start with the foam, and then we surface activate using polyacrylic acid, right? So it's to basically to charge up the surface of the material. And then we do basically multiple layering between Chi2SEN and Ti3C2, right? And then we cover this PU form at the end of the day with Chi2SEN and Ti3C2 with a number of layers. So what we have found is that we have done, if you look at basically the material before being layered by Chi2SEN and titanium carbide, this is looking at basically the pure material, and after 8 layers, you can see that it's really darkened quite significantly because it's being filled now with a lot of the titanium carbide. And this SEM and SEM images does demonstrate that how the degree of basically the material being deposited, okay, onto the foam. So how is the performance of this coating? Right. It can be seen is that for 8 bilayer coating, the reduction is almost close to reaching 60%, right? Even you look at the peak heat, the peak smoke release rate, right? Okay, it is up to 70% to 80%. This is based on our cone calorimeter results. So the reduction, the flammability reduction is significant. You're talking above 50%, okay, based on the layering of MXene and Chi2SEN. And if you look at even the mass loss itself, right, with the 8 bilayers, it still retains at least 40% of the material remaining behind. While for actually a foam without flame retardant, it basically burns all up, you know, by 60 seconds, right? And these are the references that I've done. So what we have demonstrated here is that, you know, one thing that I've not even shown here is that what is the weight gain? The weight gain based on our coating is roughly around 2 to 3%. So again, the 2 to 3% lightweight coating that gives you a remarkable performance of 50 to 70% reduction in flammability, you know, is really a game changer, because now we can basically take almost any foams and layer it with this lightweight fire resistance coating to achieve the desirable flammability reduction or high fire safety performance of this material. And the next thing I'd like to look at is that a lot of the things that we have done is that we do a lot of things by ad hoc to try to achieve the macroscopic behaviors of this in terms of flame retardants. But we would like to even now look at basically the intrinsic behavior, or basically the internal behavior of why polymer degrades, and basically what compounds it decomposes to, you know, as it burns. So one way we have done it is that we really went down a really fundamental way, looking at the atomistic level. That is using molecular dynamics simulation theory. So essentially, molecular dynamics, okay, try to look at basically the molecules of the material, right? So basically, the whole point here is the tracking of molecules using Newton's second law with appropriate reaction forces, which is basically talk about the force field, right? And basically, by tracking each of these molecules, you can then look at this dissociation of the bonds, of the breaking of the bonds, and also the formulation of new molecules. And in order to do so, with polymers, an initial step is required, is because in actual fact, the polymer is basically a chain of these linear molecules joining together. But to actually replicate the actual foam material, we need to actually carry out a compression annealing process in order that it becomes an amorphous system that actually mimics the polymer matrix in the foam, okay? And this is done through actually applying a temperature, you know, a suitable temperature to carry out this process. And what we have done here is that we took another step to try to understand whether we could look at typical polymers, for example, high-density polyethylene, PMMA, or even high-impact polystyrene, and to look at actually how they degrade when the material is subjected to a high temperature. So in order to do so, we took the amorphous system, right, of these various polyethylene and polystyrene, PMMA. We subject it to a temperature that is close to the breaking of the bonds, which is roughly above 2000 K, right? And based on that, we can now see what other compounds it will form once the molecules break. So these are some of this is basically trying to demonstrate the simulations, okay, across time. As you notice is that we are looking at picoseconds, so basically talking about 10 to the minus 10 seconds, right? And we really track this development of the breaking of the bonds through time, okay, to until maybe talking about nanoseconds or millisecond to actually see that what other compounds, okay, it generated. Based on this graph itself, which is basically looking at transient development, we could see that it could form, you know, compounds like methane, acetylene, methyl, basically all the compounds that actually relate as associated with the alkaline groups, alkane groups, right? Okay, which is interesting because the polymer system, the polymers are actually made from fossil fuels. And the fossil fuels has a richness basically of carbon and hydrogen atoms. And it is not surprising that these polymers itself do degrade when it burns to these compounds, as would be expected as well. But the complexity of the reaction, right, actually precludes us from actually determining what is the actual compound that actually contributes to the combustion behavior. And the only way to do so is through these molecular dynamic simulations. So based on this, if we compare some of the kinetic pyrolysis kinetic or the degradation kinetics itself, if we compare with experiments based on the Arrhenius expression, as you can see from the table here, right, our MD simulation really comes very close to the experiment, whatever being measured during experiment, as well as other literature that reports there. We are sort of in the range. So that means that it gives us confidence that, you know, whatever we try to achieve, it is an acceptable approach. And we can now use this approach to actually look at a wide range of material, especially polymeric materials that are composites in nature instead of its original polymer metrics. So if you look at a comparison with Numerica in terms of its time degradation behavior based on the theoretical differential thermogravimetric behavior itself, you can see our prediction using MD comes very close with experiments as well. Now, these figures are significant because it gives us confidence now that we can use this kinetic rate and to be fed into computational models. For example, like CFD models and so forth. So what we have done here is that we have actually gone through a very fundamental route and we could derive actually useful data as input to the CFD model. One of the good things that actually comes out from this work itself is that we can look even at the charring behavior of this material. So for example, by tracking at least the carbon 3+ molecules itself, right, we can actually look at the percentage of basically the percentage of char mass fraction, okay, of these three materials. For example, like you look at high density polyethylene, which basically have a char fraction of roughly 0.3%, which is comparable with experiment, as well as PMMA and also high impact polystyrene, which is close to 1%. So again, that, you know, the richness of the data we actually obtained from molecular actually give us a lot of insights into the polymer degradation behavior. This slide here just show you what is a breakdown all the compounds that were derived from the MD simulation itself. What we can do from this data now is that we can use this as the fuel for the combustibility of polymers. Because in actual fact, when you try to even get things out from the cone calorimeter, the cone calorimeter is unable to actually get down to this fundamental level, to actually get the species that actually what constitute the burning of polymer. The molecular dynamics actually offer you this avenue. And now we know what are the compounds that will contribute to the combustible, and we can feed all these compounds now into the CFD model. So another thing that I'd like to present here is basically looking at characterization of flame retardant mechanism. So basically what we have done here is that we're using molecular dynamics now to look at the introduction of APP. As all of you know that APP, ammonium polyphosphate, is heavily used in a lot of flame retardants nowadays. It's one of the widely used flame retardants. So what we wanted to do is whether we could develop a polymer composites, containing APP, right? As again, we follow the annealing process, and what we result at the end of the day is that, if we basically combine it with HDPE, and the APP will be filled within the polymer matrix as shown by the right-hand figure there. And if we look at the flame retardant mechanism, the first thing that we really notice that if you look at the number of carbon atoms actually prevailing during the degradation process is that the level of carbon atoms is much greater than the original HDPE. That means that the promoting of char in the material to actually suppress the degradation, to actually insulate the material from actually degrading more. And also, APP also undergoes a dehydration process, which actually forms water vapor to actually even suppress the flammability, the combustion behavior as well. And this is how we could get into insights how the APP can be an effective flame retardant, right, for actually flame-proofing polymers. Another work we have done as well is that we're looking at actually now how you link the molecular dynamics data to CFD models, right? And this work, what we have done here is that we took the high-density polyethylene and we combine it, imagine like a layer-by-layer method with chitosan and graphene oxide, all right, as demonstrated by this figure here, okay? And based on the high-density polyethylene, okay, we compare with experimental data, okay, with experimental and also basically experimental data with the combination of chitosan and carbon and graphene oxide. As you can see from this simulation here is that our simulation data do compare very well experiment. And again, it gives us confidence that whatever we are actually, how we approach the problem, whether from a degradation process, but now looking at how flame retardant can be used to even look at to inhibit the degradation behavior. Molecular dynamics appears that we are able to do so. And based on this, we extract some of the useful data out to be put in the CFD model. And because we are trying to mimic a real-life experiment, we chose a concurrent environment to demonstrate the flame retardant of this material or HDPE. As you can see is that based on the irradiation of 35 kilowatt per meter squared, which we carried in a concurrent experiment as well, you can see that the flame reduction is quite significant, right? At 180 seconds, basically the material is still remaining, right? And nextly, the good thing about the CFD model now, since we start comparing with the concurrent, so we could actually even extract out useful information of the carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide emission, okay, during the degradation process itself. As you can see here, that with a flame retardant HDPE, the quantity of CO2 is much less. They are much less. Also, what our CFD model could do is actually looking at the surface regression of the polymer as it undergoes a degradation. That means that we can even track the melting of the material themselves as well. As you can see here, the comparison, that's being predicted here. So the concluding remarks that I'd like to take away from this presentation is that synthetic materials create fire hazards mainly due to the high flammability of polymers. Secondly, what we have done here is that we have managed to develop a novel 2D nanosheet material combining with organic compounds like chitosan that have resulted in remarkable performance of fire resistance. And the good thing about this coating we have developed, it is lightweight in nature. And what we have done here also is that we have used MD to model or to better understand complex multi-phase pyrolysis and charring behaviors. And also what we have done here is that we have actually used MD simulations to identify the required decomposition behavior and use that as inputs, for example, the kinetics to the CFD model. This then gives us the richness of predictions of toxic gas, charring, and smoke particulate predictions. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask, about the presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Yeo. The second speaker for today is Mr. Chu Yu Kong. He will be talking on the fire safety on the use of combustible material in buildings. Mr. Chu Yu Kong is a veteran professional fire officer. In his long career in Hong Kong's Fire Services Department, Mr. Chu has progressed from the rank with duties ranging from operation, departmental, resources planning, specialist training, to investigation and research on licensing and certification matters. Since November 2021, Mr. Chu has been at the helm of the Police Division of the Licensing and Certification Command of the department, responsible for administering and reviewing legislation and licensing policies, formulating guidelines on fire protection, as well as handling legal and prosecution issues. So I welcome Mr. Chu, please.
Good morning, Professor Daniel Low, ladies and gentlemen. I'm YK Chu from the Hong Kong Fire Service Department. I'm very honored to have the opportunity to share with you the regulatory dreams of the Hong Kong FSD over the use of combustible materials in buildings. Before going into my presentations, I'm sure you all agree that fire safety is one of the primary considerations in building design. In Hong Kong, both Buildings Department and FSD will be responsible on this aspect. The Buildings Department is committed to promoting building safety, setting and enforcing safety, health and environmental standards for private buildings, as well as improving the quality of buildings development. By virtue of the building's audience, BD ensures that minimum safety and health standards are maintained in the design, construction, use, and safety maintenance of the buildings. Fire safety in buildings is determined by a number of factors: the provision of means of escape in case of fire, the ability of the building to resist the effect of fire and to minimize the spread of fire and smoke, and the provision of means of access to enable firefighters to effect firefighting and rescue operations. I'm sure Ms. Tam of the Buildings Department will give you a full presentation this afternoon. The Fire Service Department, apart from providing the frontline firefighting and rescue operation, govern the provision of fire service installations and equipment in buildings and the maintenance of them. Now we start my sharing. In Hong Kong, The building's ordinance, amongst others, govern the safety standards of the materials used in building works. On the other hand, BD also issued the Code of Practice for Fire Safety in Buildings. This code provides guidance on compliance with the requirements laid down in the building's construction regulations and the building's planning regulations, which include the requirements for fire-resisting constructions, means of escape, and means of access for firefighting and rescue to the buildings. In addition, it also provides guidelines on the testing standards for the fire properties of buildings' elements and components. Fire safety management of building as well as the alternative approach in fire safety design. As those publications fall under purview of the buildings department, I'm not focusing on those part today. Instead, as a regulator as well as the firefighters, I would like to share with you on our approach on controlling the combustible material in buildings. For example, wall lining, piriform matrix, and carpet, especially in the licensed premises, say restaurants. In the past, there were several tragic fires involving combustible material that caused serious injuries and property damage. In 2003, a nightclub fire in Rhode Island claiming 100 deaths and 230 injuries. The fire was caused by the use of pyrotechnics during the stage performance, which ignite thermal acoustic foams in walls and ceilings surrounding the stage. It which flashed over within 1 minute, causing more combustible materials to burn. Intense black smoke and flux could up within 2 minutes. The investigation revealed that the car was not protected by sprinkler system, and the FDS concluded that a fire sprinkler system would have contained fire long enough to give everyone time to exit safely. In 2009, there was a similar fire in Perm, Russia. Again, the use of pyrotechnics during the stage performance ignited the wall decoration and ceiling lining. The fire quickly spread over the nightclub, resulting in the death of 153 people. I think we all familiarized with the third case. In June 2017, a fire broke out in the 24-story Grenfell Towers in London, causing 72 people died and more than 70 were injured. The fire was started in the kitchen of a domestic building. It spread rapidly up the building exteriors, bringing fire and smoke to other residential floors. This was due to the building's cladding and external insulation, since the air gap between them enabled the stacking effect. The fire burned for about 60 hours before finally being extinguished. The fire demonstrated a high risk posed by the use of combustible material, both internally and externally. The Rhode Island fire triggered an immediate effort to strengthen fire code protections. The Life Safety Code was subsequently amended, requiring the provision of automatic fire sprinkler in nightclubs and similar locations that accommodate more than 100 occupants, and all new locations in the same category and the additional exit requirement for new nightclub occupancy. In the aftermath of the Perm fire, the local authorities stepped up the enforcement actions on the violations of fire safety rules. For the Grenfell Tower fire, the Phase 1 inquiry report was released in 2019. The presence of aluminum composite material windscreen panels added as a source of load, making the flames spread so rapidly to other parts of the buildings and the loss of compartmentations. The fire on the outside quickly entered the facts. The Phase 2 inquiry is still underway to hear evidence which examine the role of the government in establishing the legislative regime for the fire safety testing and classification of construction products and systems, and formulating guidelines on how to comply with it. I'll now share with you several massive fire disasters in Hong Kong involving combustible declaration which attract widespread public attention. In November 1996, a fire took place in a 16-story commercial building. The fire damaged the bottom 2 floors and the top 3 floors of the buildings, while the middle floors remained relatively intact. At the time of the fire, the gallery building was undergoing internal renovations, during which new elevators were to be installed. 2 elevator shafts in the buildings had their elevators removed, and bamboo scaffolding were installed within the shaft. The fire-resistant elevator doors were also removed to allow light into the elevator shaft for the welders. A piece of hot metal fell from the 13th floor, sparkling a fire in the 2nd floor lift lobby. The fire consumed the internal bamboo scaffolding. The open elevator shaft provided a source of fresh air, creating a chimney effect that eventually rose to the 13th floor, starting another fire there. The tragic fire eventually caused 41 deaths and 81 injuries. Soon after the gallery building fire, there was a trial firebomb attack in a karaoke bar in January 1997. The karaoke premises occupied 4 floors and 18 stories commercial buildings. The fire bombs were heard in the stairways at the 1st floor and the launch body at the 2nd floor. The fire spread quickly to the upper floors through the staircase with several explosions. Since the karaoke rooms were designed with sound insulation, the customer did not discover the fire in the early stage and were later trapped in the rooms and smoke-filled corridors. 70 people were killed and 25 were injured in the blaze. In April 1997, several months after the Top 1 fire, a fire broke out in a residential building in Mayfield Central, leaving 9 deaths and 37 injuries, including 3 firemen. Most of the victims died from smoke inhalation. The fire investigation revealed that there were a lot of combustible, which include foam matrix and upholstery. The foam gave off immense heat and generated high volume of smoke and toxic gases. Following the major fires at Top 1 Karaoke, an interdepartmental working group was set up to coordinate efforts to better control karaoke establishments. The working group considered that the fire risk in karaoke was high in view of the unique characteristics of its operations. General awareness of the customers may be affected by the consumption of alcoholic drinks and loud music inside the premises. These premises are often partitioned into small, soundproof cubicles and access through long and narrow passages. Such special layout make it difficult to escape in case of fire. General fire safety provision could not adequately address the fire risks associated with, for example, the special closed cubicle layout. A set of prescribed minimum standards to safeguard fire and public safety were thus essential. Eventually, the karaoke establishment's audience was put into operation in January 2003 to regulate such premises. A licensing system was also introduced under the audience for applicants to apply for a permit or license. Upon the result of referral from the licensing authority, FSD will conduct on-site assessment and formulate fire safety requirements for the premises. In general, combustible materials used in karaoke are required to meet specific flammability standards. Subsequent to the Gary Building fire and Mayfield Sunshine fire, FSD conducted a territory-wide building survey in early 1998 to assess the fire safety conditions of existing buildings with a view to formulating a better overall strategy to improve fire safety in existing buildings. In the same year, the BD also conducted a sample survey of 1,200 buildings. The survey indicated that the fire safety conditions of many old private buildings in Hong Kong were not up to standards. To improve the situation, several ordinances were amended or introduced to upgrade the fire safety standards of buildings and to better protect people working or living in there from the risk of fire. Apart from improving the overall building fire safety standards, FSD conducted an extensive research on the vulnerability standards for matrices and upholstered furnitures. Such standards will thereafter be specified in the fire safety requirements for licensed or registered premises. We are all very aware of the fire risks posed by the combustible materials, especially for premises that attract large influx of people. Fire quickly spread along the wall and ceiling line to other parts of the buildings. On the other hand, toxic gases will be released during combustion, causing people to suffocate and loss of consciousness, or even death. In the following slide, I will briefly introduce the regulatory regime on the building combustible materials. The use of combustible material in buildings is regulated by the local ordinance, regulations, and codes. In US, the Life Safety Code provides the flammability standard for interior finishes that will be tested in accordance with NFPA 286. In UK, the internal lines are regulated by the Buildings Regulation 2010, in which they shall meet the relevant fire performance classifications as stipulated in approved document B. In Singapore, the Code of Practice for Fire Precautions in Buildings 2018 stipulated that finishes shall not contain any plastic materials unless they meet the relevant flammability standard for the flame spread and smoke density. In Hong Kong, as introduced in the very beginning, there are mainly two regulatory regimes, one for the use of combustible materials in new buildings, and one for licensed or registered premises. When new building is constructed, the authorized persons of the project who certifies the building materials, including the line works, have fulfilled the relevant flammability standards. We are ensured all lines for acoustic and thermal insulation purpose, inducting and concealed stockation, and all lines for acoustic, thermal insulations and decorative purpose within the means of escape shall be of class 1 or 2 weight of surface spread of flame as per BS 476 Part 7 or its international equivalent, or be brought up to that standard by the use on an approved fire retardant product. Before arranging the acceptance inspection, the AP will certify and serve a confirmation letter to FSD for verification. On the other hand, some premises may be later used as licensed or registered premises, for example, restaurants, karaoke, non-design school, etc. Such use will certainly attract a visibly large number of persons to stay for long periods of time. From fire safety point of view, FSD may, subject to the result of on-site assessment during the processing of licensing or registration applications, impose additional fire safety requirements to reduce the fire risk posed to these premises. Undoubtedly, one of the main reasons leading to the casualty or even fatality in case of fire is the inhalation of smoke. We are very concerned on the conditions along the means of escape. For example, the deposition of material posing obstructions to means of escape, or the installation of wall linings not fulfilling the flammability standards, which will materially increase the likelihood of fire or the danger to life in the outbreak of fire. If additional wall lining or floor covering were installed in the means of escape of the buildings after the issuance of the occupation permit, we look into the matters to see whether they can meet the relevant standards. If existence of fire hazards has been confirmed after investigation, our officer will take appropriate enforcement action. For example, issue the fire hazards abatement notice to the responsible persons and require him to ratify the fire hazards. As an authority, we have a statutory duty to give advice on fire protection measures. In formulating the fire safety requirements when processing license or registration applications, FSD will strike the balance between the required fire safety standards and the practicability as far as practicable. We cannot eliminate all fire risks. For example, stopping all cooking activities in a restaurant or stop using any electrical appliances. We have to consider the genuine need of the operators to install such equipment. Wall linings, pre-foam filled furniture in their premises. Instead, we aim to limit the fire spread or the generation of toxic gases in case of fire. We also seek ways to promote early detections and warnings to customers thereat. Therefore, we adopted a flexible and pragmatic approach in formulating the requirements. These combustible materials shall meet specific flammability standards, or to achieve fire safety standards by applying fire retarding spray. Fire risk in the licensed or registered premises generally refer to the following factors. For the fire load, restaurant owners will often install wall lining or floor ceilings for decoration purposes. Tutorial centers will also install partitions to separate rooms for conducting classes. Undoubtedly, the installation of such will increase the overall fire load inside the premises. Most restaurant fires originate from the kitchens, with the negative flaming cooking process. NFPA previously conducted a survey on structural fire in eating and drinking establishments. The report revealed that cooking equipment was the leading cause of fire in these premises, accounting for 61% of fire and 38% of direct property damages. Other factors, including electrical equipment, heating equipment, and smoking materials. In processing license applications, we consider the business nature of restaurant or club, as well as the type of fuel used in such premises. When processing license application, we must be satisfied that the subject premises are not exposed to any undue risk of fire. or cause any potential hazard to other occupancy in the same buildings. Our officers will, among others, take into consideration the compatibility of the proposed licensed premises with adjacent occupancy and the potential hazards posed by the potential licensed premises to adjacent occupancy. All other contributing factors should also be considered, include the provision of fire service installation installed or to be installed, direct or indirect communication between them. Consideration would also be given to any remedial measures or provisions which may be effected to overcome the problem. When conducting on-site assessment for license applications, our officers will pay particular attention to the presence of highly combustible materials, for example, for ceiling, partitions, wall furnishing, carpet, foam-filled furniture, or matrix. The fire risk level of the premises is then determined, and fire safety requirements for mitigating the risks are formulated accordingly. Based on the result, we may impose additional fire safety requirements. For some lavishly decorated premises involving a large quantity of combustible materials in the sitting accommodation, FSD will impose additional fire safety requirements on these premises. It will require the license application to install additional fire service installation equipment. For example, fire hydrant, hose-reel system, fire detection system, or smoke extraction system under application, where appropriate. Generally speaking, combustible materials used as forcing, partition, or wall furnishing in licensed or registered premises are required to meet the requirements of BS 4786, Part 7. We also accept other equivalent international standards. The license applicants may also achieve the compliance by treating this combustible material with a fire retardant paint or solution acceptable to DFS. In the case of carpet, this will comply with BS 5287. All foam-filled furniture and matrix shall comply with BS 7176 and BS 7177 respectively, or Technical Report 133 and 129 issued by the California Departments of Consumer Affairs, Bureau of Furniture and Insulating Materials. The licensed applicants are required to produce the relevant certificates to the FSD during a compliance inspection to prove that the combustible material meets the relevant standards. In 2008, a local fire broke out in the karaoke premises of Cornwall Court. The Profiles investigation revealed that the rapid spread of fire was attributed to the presence of combustible dust or frost accumulated inside the ceiling wall, which caused the spread of fire to the whole nightclub. The fire eventually claimed the death of 2 people and 2 firefighters. The fire unveiled the need to strengthen the monitoring of fire safety in licensed premises, especially in places patronized by public members in large number. FSD, in cooperation with the licensing authority, established a new measure for premises to ensure continuous compliance with fire safety requirements. The measures were in place until 2014 and has remained effective till now. Under the measures, if FSD finds that there is a fire hazard arising from a breach of fire safety requirements in the food premises that would render the premises unsafe for business operation, FSD will take appropriate enforcement actions under our ambit and recommend to the licensing authority to suspend the license immediately. The food premises shall suspend the operation under the law until the fire hazard is abated. If the premises fails to obey the fire hazard, the full premises license is subject to cancellation by the licensing authority as well. From fire safety point of view, the addition or alteration of combustible material for false ceiling, combustible partitions, decorations or PU foam-filled furniture in licensed or registered premises may increase the fire risk. Therefore, FSD requires the responsible persons of the licensed or registered premises to submit a test report or a certificate to verify if the newly installed or altered combustible material meets the specific flammability standards. The measure is to ensure that the combustible materials continuously comply with the required flammability standard so that the fire safety standard in those premises can be maintained. In order to raise the concern of the licensed or registered premises on the use of combustible materials, FSD also issues circular letters and advisory letters to remind the responsible persons to safely use the combustible materials and comply with the required arrangements. In prescriptive-based approaches, fire safety in buildings is provided using a combination of active and passive fire protection systems. Active fire protection systems are designed to detect and control the fire in its initial stage and are more important from fire safety perspective, whereas passive fire protection systems are designed to ensure structural stability during fire exposure and to contain fire spread. The main goal is to allow ample time for firefighting and rescue operations. FST has long been adopting a holistic and continuous approach to regulate the use of combustible materials inside the buildings. The advancement in technologies in the active fire safety provisions will certainly provide early detection of fire and an early warning to the building's occupants. However, the result depends on the response to the warning amongst the occupants thereat, as people tend to underestimate the fire and delay the evacuations. It is purely human behavior. We advocate to act as a facilitator in addition to a regulator when we formulate these requirements by adopting a flexible and pragmatic approach. We promote to the public 3 basic skills of emergency preparedness, namely extinguish and prevent fire, self-help and help others, escape and evacuate. It sets out the overall strategies to strengthen one's capability in dealing with emergency or contingencies. At the initial stage of a fire, one shall assess whether they can effectively control and even extinguish the fire. If negative, he shall help himself and when safe to do so, help others. At the same time, he should be able to immediately follow the rules and sign and make a quick escape to safety. To conclude, enhancement of public awareness on fire safety and proper use of technology and resources in fire safety provisions are key to mitigating fire hazards in buildings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jiu. Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a 15-minute break now. After the break, we will have 2 more presentations followed by our Q&A session. Don't miss the chance to submit your questions anytime during the presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. The next presentation is about to begin. Before that, we would want to extend our heartfelt thank you for all our sponsors. Although this year we are not able to present souvenirs to them in person, we still would like to express our appreciation to their contributions to make this event so successful. Our golden sponsor, ACOM Asia Company Limited, CM1 and Associates Limited, Government E&M Limited, KPABM Holdings Limited, Omni Fire Services Company Limited, the Association of Registered Fire Service Installation Contractors of Hong Kong Limited, the Hong Kong and China Gas Company Limited, the Hong Kong Electric Company Limited, and our Platinum sponsors, CHOP Hong Kong Limited, Easy Smart Engineering Limited, KH Foundations Limited, MTR Corporation, Sino-Land Company Limited, and our diamond sponsor, Atel Engineering Group, Henderson Land Development Company Limited. Let's start our second session. May I now invite our section chairman, Engineer Professor Low, again to introduce our speakers. Engineer Professor Low, please.
Thank you. The first speaker of this session is Dr. LKC Lipman. He will be talking on the implementation of product certification system, fire door and low-bearing fire partitions in Hong Kong. Dr. C is the committee member of HKIE certification group. He is responsible for the drafting and updating of the PCCS PFPP document. He is also the technical director of the Research Engineering Development Facade Consultant Limited, RED. He joined the company in 2012 and is mainly responsible for the development of fire protection product testing, assessment, fire engineering and product certification. He is also the Hong Kong HKIE registered technical auditor for the Hong Kong Product Conformity Certification Scheme, PCCS, for passive fire protection product, PFPP. Dr. C has represented RED many times in exchange and meeting in the testing laboratories across Europe. Dr. C has more than 15 years of experience in fire testing, fire engineering and passive fire protection, product certification. Before joining RED, he worked as a senior fire engineer at Warrington Fire and was responsible for fire engineering design, product testing, and technical assessor for the certifier program. He got the bachelor and a doctorate degree in the Department of Mechanical Engineering, the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Dr. C also participated in the compilation of the third edition of the PCCS PFPP, published by the Hong Kong Institute of Steel Construction. He is also currently act as the thesis instructor of the Fire Safety Engineering Program, co-organization by the University of Central Lancashire, and the City University of Hong Kong. May I welcome Dr. C, please?
Yep. Many thanks for the introduction from the Professor Low. Yeah, many thanks. So that, first of all, I would like to representing the HKISC to thank you, HKIE Fire Division, to have invitation to us, and then so that we can have a share of our product certification scheme here. So that the topic of this seminar is the implementation of the product certification system, which is applied for the fire doors and the low-bearing fire partition. Yep. So that in this presentation, it will mainly divided into two parts. The first one is the Section 1, which is the introduction of Product Conformity Certification Scheme, which we also call it as a PCCS. The Section 2 is a case study on how to conduct an audit on the timber door set, the fire door set. So for the Section 1, it is just a brief introduction of the Product Conformity Certification Scheme. So that you can see in this slide, there's a photo which is showing the cover page of the Product Certification Scheme. So that if you are in this industry, normally you will have a chance to in touch with some kind of product certification scheme, for example, for fire door or for cement tower or for any others for any other construction products. Yeah, normally they will have the product certification scheme. So before we talk about the product certification scheme, maybe we will have first introduction about what is the current practice that we are that the approval authority they are how they can approve the fire door first. So in the current practice, normally if you are in this industry, you have to have a look on this code of practice for the fire safety in the buildings 2011. So in this code of practice, it is a guideline for the construction of the buildings in Hong Kong. Yeah. So this code of practice is issued on the 2011. So at that time, the product approval section, which is according to the section E 16.1. And it has mentioned that the BA, the building authority, will recognize the Hawkless accredited laboratory, issue the test reports and the assessment reports, so that the building departments, they will only accept the reports issued by the accredited laboratory, or if the test reports is not able to fully represent the products that will be used, then there will be an assessment report, which in the assessment report, it is the reports that based on the results of a test report, so that there will be some minor modification allowed, so that it will be mentioned in the assessment report. So combining the test report and the assessment report, the application of the timber door set, of the fire timber door set, can be established. So that at the time, only the test report and the assessment report will be submitted, and then show the fire rating performance of the products only. So that at that time, if there's only a test report and the assessment report, which is useful, usually it will the manufacturer or the product supplier, they will submit the product sample to the accredited laboratory for the testing. So that as long as their products arrive the laboratory will have to verify the construction of the submitted products. That means that they will have to check the construction of the timber door set, or the lab may go to the factory to check the internal construction of the door set if necessary. Yes, because usually if a door set have been sent to the laboratory, usually they are in the end product form. But in order to review the internal construction of the door set, usually we will have to do some destruction or damage to the door set. So that in order to avoid this kind of issues, the lab may have to go to the factory to check the internal construction. And also, it is the requirement for the new EN series of tests. For the OBS test, actually there is no requirement for the lab to verify the door set. And after they have submitted the door set to the laboratory, usually the supplier will be responsible for the installation of the timber door to the test rig and for the test, so that the lab will not help to install the door set. The supplier themselves have to install the door set. It is because the installation method is also one of the assessment criteria that have to be demonstrated in the test. So that after they have installed the product, the test can be conducted, and also to determine the fire resistant performance in accordance with the test standard. And after the test, the laboratory will issue the fire resistant test report to show whether the door can fulfill or satisfy the duration of the fire resistance. But you have to know that the test report actually just tell the result of the test. That means that whether the door set achieved how many minutes of the integrity or how many minutes of the installation. And also in the test report, there will be a full description of the construction of the door set and also the product drawings. So that the test report actually have a quite thorough description of the door set and also how it's performed under the test. However, in the test report, there is one main concern that that have not been mentioned, which is the quality. So, actually, for products that can be used in the market, or actually for the products that can be used by the user, the quality of the product is more important, or I should say, it is as equivalent importance as the performance of the products. Actually, the quality of the product, not only the end performance of the product, but also it shows how the products can be made. All the manufacturing follows the well-defined procedure to manufacture the product. The use of the same material and the same tub or same blending during the manufacture, and also during the manufacturing, the workers are well trained to perform the manufacturing, and also in the manufacturing process, is there any proper quality control? So all the key issue is very important that will affect the quality of the product. However, if we only have a test report or an assessment report, we are not able to assess the quality of the product, because the quality is more likely that it can be assessed during the manufacturing rather than just fire test. So actually, I believe that most of us now is quite familiar with the so-called certification scheme, and also for some kind of CE marking. So in current period, usually we will have some kind of COVID rapid test, so that you will usually see in the package there will be some CE marking, which is as a clear mark for you to whether you buy this brand or buy another brand. Yeah. So that the CE marking is actually one kind of product certification scheme. So other than CE marking, in Hong Kong there is still some kind of product certification mark that you may seen before. For example, the HKIE mark and also the STC tester mark. And for some global industry, there may be some UL listed UL listing, UL label, and also some BM charter label and Ethernet label, something like that. So that actually, how we can assure the quality of the product? In the previous practice, if we just have a test report or an assessment report for the approval purpose, sometimes it may create some kind of problem that the doors, when they are doing the manufacturing, maybe the quality is not as good as when they are manufacturing the door for the test. So that if the manufacturing process have some kind of errors or some kind of tolerance that over the limit, then the door sets that manufactured may be not as good as the test product. So that sometimes you may see some news about the fire-rated product. So that if the fire-rated products actually manufacturer is not as good as the quality as the tested, then and if it is installed in the building already, it may cause some kind of problems. And also, if only the test report is valid in the market, sometimes there may be an issue that some other manufacturer, if they get the reports, they claim that they are actually manufacturing door sets according to the construction that's shown in the test report. Then in the current practice, it seems that it is still valid in the market, so that it can still be used. However, if the manufacturing site or the manufacturing procedure or the workers that manufacture door sets is another parties, to our sense, it is actually a total different story. Yeah. So that in such case, there may be some problem that the door sets that manufactured, although it looks like the same, However, the internal or actually the quality will be quite different, so that it is some kind of deficiency in the current practice that for the product approval. So in order to tackle this, actually for the BD, on the September 2021, they have already issued a PNAP, the PNAP, which is the APP 165. So that this APP 165 is the PNAP which is related to the product certification scheme. So that in this new APP 165, it has mentioned that the BA will also accept a valid COC, which is the certification of conformity, issued by the HKCAS accredited CB. HKCAS referred to the Hong Kong Certification Accreditation Service. Accredited by the CB is a certification body as an alternative to the test or assessment report prepared by the Hawkless Lab. So that with this letter issued, it provides one more approach for the product approval, which is the COC issued by the CB. So that for this letter, it is not actually fail out the old practice, but it provides one more solution for the product approval. If the COC is valid, it is no need to submit the test and assessment reports. And also, for the current status, the product certification scheme will only apply to the fire-rated doors and the low-bearing partition only. However, we will keep updating the product certification scheme so that it can be include more and more fire-rated products. So in a short summary, for the current practice for the approval for the use of the PFPP in Hong Kong, PFPP means the passive fire protection products, which usually refer to some kind of fire door, some fire-rated wall or fire-rated ceiling. Those are the passive construction products, so that they will not actively to suppress fire, like the sprinkler, something like that. So that we will call it a passive fire protection product, PFPP. So that for the manufacturer or the product supplier, in current practice, they will just submit the product sample to an accredited laboratory for the testing. The lab, they will verify the construction of the product at the lab or at the factory if necessary. And also, they will, based on the test result, issue the test report. And also, the application of the door access will be supplemented by an assessment report on allowed product variations. And also, however, the reports actually just tell the performance of the submitted door during the test. It has no mention about how this door is made, and also how the manufacturing process of the door access actually is implemented. So that in the current practice, no factory audit is required, no requirement of the manufacturer to implement any the QMS. The QMS is the quality management system, and also there will be no guarantee about the product's quality during the mass production. So actually, I've talked about some quite a long time about the product certification scheme. So actually, what is a product certification scheme? The purpose of the product certification scheme is to ensure that the products in the market and submitted to the test are identical, manufactured according to the claimed manufacturing procedure, and match the stated performance with periodic monitoring by a third-party certification body, the CB. So that it is important that the monitoring is carried out by the third party, but not by the manufacturer themselves. The products are manufacturing at constant quality level as claimed. And also, there's one more important concern is that the traceability of the product, it is applicable from the raw material to the factory to the market. So it is because if the product is actually sold in the market when the user got it, but if the product has some problem, then usually we will have to find out what actually the problem is. So that with this traceability link, we can trace back the product from in the market to the factory, and also to the raw material, and also to FV, the manufacturing procedure, so that we can assess that actually in what ring the products actually have some problem during the manufacturing. So how this can be achieved? In order to achieve a product certification scheme, Usually, the factory or the manufacturing site have to implement a quality management system, the QMS. So that the QMS may be a term that you may not familiar with. However, the QMS actually is some kind of scheme like the ISO 9000, which is the quality scheme. The QMS that it will include the administration and also the manufacturing. It is because usually if we are talking about the QMS, most of the people will just have an idea that it is related to some kind of administration process. For example, the document control, how to demonstrate that all the records are well written, something like that. However, in the product certification scheme, usually the QMS have to include the manufacturing as well. That means that the manufacturing procedure should also be quality controlled. All the key procedure in the manufacturing will be well documented, and also labeling on every unit delivered product. That means that when you are when the product is actually flowing in the manufacturing process, at each stage it has to be well defined, labeled, in order to avoid some kind of misleading. And also there will be a periodic audit by the CB certification body. And also for the fire testing, the sample that we submit for test is also selected by the certification body, but not submitted by the manufacturer themselves. The CB usually will select the products from the mass production storage, so that to make sure that the product that submitted for test is randomly selected. For the product certification schemes, usually it has been already well established all over the world. For example, in the Asia region that close to us, for example, Singapore already have its product listing scheme for the PFPP. And also in China, we have the China Compulsory Certification, which also we call it the 3C certification. The Middle East is certification scheme by the Civil Defense. And in Australia or in the New Zealand, they have the so-called co-marked certification, which is in voluntary process. That means that for the certification scheme, actually, it is a voluntary. The manufacturer can do it themselves, but it's not required by the regulation. And in the European Union, the EU, which is the CE marking, I think most of us is quite familiar with now. And also some kind of global markings, for example, the UL listing and label. And in UK, there's a Warrington Fire, which is the certifier, or the EWCL. And also in UK, the BLE Global Limited, they have their own LPCB certification scheme. And in Hong Kong, we have the PCCS PFPP. And also for this scheme, actually, it is voluntary at this stage. And for this scheme, it is already adopted by the Housing Authority for quite a long time. So that all the projects related to the Housing Authority, they have for all the products that submit for use for the Housing Authority project, they have to satisfy the PACCF PFPP requirement. Okay, so that let's move to the session 2, which in session 2 I will give a case study about how audit on the fire timber door set will be carried out. So before sharing a case study, firstly I will first introduce what is the PCCS. So that in this slide there's the cover page of the PCCS. The PCCS, the owner of the PCCS is the Hong Kong Institute of Steel Construction. Actually, this scheme first issued on the 2002, and it is currently adopted by the HKIE since 2010. The second issue of the product certification scheme was issued in 2011, and also currently that we are using the latest version, which is the issue 3, which was published on the November 2017. So that it is expected to be adopted by the commercial market now, because as I say that, the product certification scheme have been adopted by the HKIE before. However, the objective to issue 3 is to expect that it can be adopted by the commercial market as well. So in the product certification scheme, the parties that may involve include the certification body, the CB, which is an independent third party who is in charge for the certification process. And also, in this CB, there will be some auditors or some technical experts that are assigned by the CB that helps the auditor to carry out the audit. And the second party should be the manufacturer or the supplier of the PFPP, who is the party that who wish their product to be certified. And also there's another party which is the testing laboratory. For the testing laboratory, it is the party who is responsible to carry out the performance of the test on the products. So for our scheme, it is already adopted by the Hong Kong Housing Authority since 2010. It is successful in assuring the quality of the products used in projects. And also, according to their comment, this is quite a good process that helps for the price control. And also, it is free from the factory monitoring. And currently, the issue 3 is now adopted by the Hong Kong Buildings Departments as well, which is they have issued the APP 165 on the September 2021. The latest version of the PACCS only apply to the fire door and the lawnmower partition system only, but it will extend to other PFPP in the coming future. So a walkthrough of the PCS PFPP, which is that this is just a flow of how the PCS can be applied, so that as long as you get the document on site in the website, then you can have a look on it. So for the manufacturing of the timber door set, actually, when you are doing the audit, we are not only assessing the end product. We have to assess the manufacturing process, the whole manufacturing process, including the raw material selection and also the raw material purchase, something like that. So that we will have to check that whether all the raw material have been well labeled in each stage. And also, if they have any tools that they use in order to check the quality of the products during every manufacturing process. For example, some kind of dimensional check equipment, and also some kind of moisture content checking. Because for the timber doors, the moisture content is one of the key concerns that may affect the fire resistant performance of the door. So that, and also we have to check that whether all the equipment that they use is well calibrated. In the manufacturing process of the PFPP, actually, there's in the technical procedure, some kind of procedure that may be quite factory specific, because in the manufacturing of the process, usually you may see that in some kind of minor issue, for example, the broad joint, usually for every factory they will have their own practice. For example, in these photos on the top left corner, that's showing a broad joint which have a stagger joint. So that as long as this stagger joint have been used in the tested product, then usually it has also been used in the mass production as well. So that the audit is actually to make sure that all the manufacturing process is actually according to the tested product as well. So this slide showing some kind of movie which is representing the manufacturing of the process of the door set. For example, the use of the adhesive to the door set, and also to adhere to the door facing, something like that. And also there's another movie which is showing a power of door set, which is now moving to the pressing machine, so that the door set, after it has adhered to the door facing, they have to press for a constant pressure for duration in order to make sure that the adhesion of the facing of the door core is actually to a certain limit or satisfy certain criteria, something like that. So that during the audit, we may have some kind of destructive test to check the end product. That means that at this stage, although it is the end product at this stage, however, we still have to do some kind of destructive to the door set in order to verify whether the quality at this stage is satisfy what is the criteria that's set out by the factory. And also apart from the equipment, we also have to check some kind of record, like the training record, and also the competence of the workers that they are competent to perform the manufacturing process at that time. And apart from that manufacturing process, actually the packing of the end product, and also the labeling for the delivered product is also very important. Because as long as door sets have been prepared in the manufacturing site, they will have to well packed, and also, and if each parcel, they will have to have a very clear label showing that it is a fire-rated product and to which site, and also some kind of unique number on each door set. It is important that for door sets, but not for every parcel. It is for each door set. They have a well-defined label so that each door can be traced back from the site to the factory to the user and to the raw material. So the marking of the label should be included at following: the brand name, the manufacturing mark, and also the rating, the details of the size, and the address of the manufacturer. And also after all those labeling has been selected, so that the CB will have to select the product for the initial type test. The door is selected by the CB, but not submitted by the manufacturer themselves. For the initial type test, actually, the door will be selected by the CB, and then it will submitted to the fire test lab, and then the procedure will be same as the previous one, which conduct the test and then issue the test report. After a successful factory audit, then if there's no NC or some kind of minor NC, then they will have to do the rectification. And with the satisfactory performance, then the certification can be issued by the CB to certify the product. Usually, the certification scheme will be a 3-year cycle, and every year have to conduct the annual surveillance, and every 3 years after that, it will be a recertification. The purpose of the recertification is to have the products to be certified, and then they can submit for the approval in the market. So in conclusion, actually the product certification scheme helps to gain the confidence for the users to use their product, and also it also helps the manufacturer to keep the cost control and also to have a well allocation of the resources. So there are some kind of disadvantages. Maybe the design variation is limited, or the cost of the product is it has to be expensive, more expensive. Is some kind of disadvantages. Yeah. So that thank you. It is the end of my presentation. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. C. The fourth speaker for this morning is Engineer Dr. Yang Wang. Dr. Yang Wang is a director with 8th Arab and Region Technical Services Portfolio Leader. He has a wide range of experience in fire safety engineering and design, with technical specialism in structural fire engineering. With over 20 years of engineering consultancy experience, his past and present projects include some of the tallest buildings and the largest infrastructure in Hong Kong, China, and Southeast Asia. Dr. Yang Wang is currently a council member of IFE Hong Kong branch. He is also a chartered engineer, fellow member of IFE and member of Hong Kong IE. Dr. Wang, please.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Low, and thank you, Hong Kong IE, for inviting me to talk about timber today. Yes, so today my presentation is about recent development in fire safety for timber construction. Timber is a very controversial or interesting subject, especially for fire engineers. Therefore, I thought it's good to have a discussion today with all the experts and professionals to look at why and how we can make timber safe for use in buildings. So my agenda, I have 4 items to share today. First of all, I want to talk about timber as a low carbon footprint material and how timber is used in different types of buildings and different use. And I'll go into the fundamental timber behavior in fire. And then finally, I'll share some international and local fire code regulations update in recent years to kind of make timber become more popular or more usable in buildings. So why timber? We all know that climate change is a massive issue. And based on the current practice, if we do nothing about limiting carbon emission, experts in the world have predicted that our temperature will increase by around 3 degrees by the end of this century. So 3 degrees is going to be a disaster, and there are many documentaries talking about how bad 3 degrees will be. It's almost the end of the world. So in fact, we are already seeing some impact of global warming or extreme climate. And recently we have experienced the hottest winter and probably the warmest and the warmest summer in Hong Kong. So if all government or national governments meet their targets of 2050 of net zero emission by 2050, global warming could be limited to as low as 2.1 degree by end of this century. So this is actually part of what the global leaders agree in Paris in 2015. So the Paris Agreement was adopted by 196 parties at the COP21 in Paris and came in force in 2016. So as part of this commitment to achieve net zero by 2050, many countries and regions, including Hong Kong, have set pathway to net zero carbon emission by 2050. And the document on the right is documentation published by our government on how to take climate actions to achieve carbon neutral by 2050. So according to the World Green Building Council, buildings currently account for 39% of energy-related carbon emission globally. So timber is one of our most traditional construction materials and is recognized to play a key role in both sides of the net zero balance. Timber is less carbon intensive to manufacture, to transport, and to erect compared to steel and concrete structures. So if we are able to use more sustainable material like timber, we can reduce the embodied carbon in buildings significantly. And as you can see from the chart on the right, if timber can be used in superstructures, which is made up of 42% of embodied carbon in buildings, and then timber can also be used in substructures, which made up of 13% of embodied carbon, and also timber can be used in cladding and finishes, which made up of 29% of embodied carbon. So all in all, if we can replace timber, replace concrete or steel or other material with timbers, we will contribute significantly to the net zero effort that everybody is trying to achieve. So timber, why is it so good? Because when timber basically sequesters carbon during the its growth process. Timber can be demountable and recycled at the end of a life, and timber structures are more lightweight. So therefore, when we don't have to build as big of a foundations or columns or beams to support timber, less material, therefore more sustainable. Construction with timber is often quicker and cleaner, with less time spent on site. So that's another benefit. And also there's a strong architectural desire for exposed timber with well-being and aesthetic benefits. So these are all the reasons why we want to reconsider timber, although we all know that timber is probably not so good for fire safety. So I'm going to talk about or show a few project examples in Hong Kong and overseas where timber are used in buildings. So the first project that I'd like to share or show is the Wah Hap Sek Columbarium in Hong Kong. You can see that timber has been used as external decoration, cladding materials, and so on. So it's quite common. I wouldn't say quite common in Hong Kong, but it's quite common everywhere in the world to use timber for external cladding. And the next example is the Ping Shan Tin Shui Wai Cultural and Recreation Complex, again in Hong Kong. you can see that timber is used as part of the external cladding, screen, floor, and ceiling materials. So in Hong Kong, you can see that timber is not unusual especially for internal decoration finishes use. Outside Hong Kong, the picture you can see on the screen is a project for Mactan Cebu International Airport Terminal 2. This terminal was completed and opened in 2018. It's one of the newest airport in the Philippines. It's a 3-story building of 65.5 meters square, featuring arched timber roof, and which is the first in Asia. So you can see that the use of timber material has grown substantially in the last few years, given its lightweight property, lower carbon footprint, and so on. And not just in Southeast Asia and Hong Kong, also in China. The project on the screen is the Xiang'e Primary School reconstructions after the Sichuan earthquake in 2008. So this project the reconstruction project was completed in 2009 after the Sichuan earthquake. It's the first project in China to adopt light wood structures system in school. And the timber material went through impregnations to achieve protection against corrosion and against fire. The design followed the China low-rise fire code, which is now actually superseded, but at the time it was valid. And the load-bearing walls and partition walls for rooms are using timber structures covered by gypsum board for fire protection, and the floor are provided with 50 millimeters lightweight concrete to cover the floor. So some of the pictures you can see, especially the bottom right corner, basically by looking at the picture you would not know that it's a timber structure building. And that's actually the common approach that we are seeing more and more when timber are being used in buildings. So when we move on to mass timber, so in recent years, mass timber is becoming very popular because when we use mass timber, they can support a larger span and taller buildings because they're actually stronger. So the most common form of mass timbers are shown on the screen. On the left-hand side is called cross-laminated timber, CLT. In the middle is called glue-laminated timber, glulam. And then on the right-hand side, probably less popular, is the laminated veneer lumber, which is LVL. So I'll go through each of them and to kind of explain a little bit what they are. So cross-laminated timber is an engineered composite product that consists of multiple layers of boards that are adhere perpendicularly to each other to achieve strength in multiple directions. It can be manufactured curved or straight, and is generally available in panel sizes up to 18 meters in length and up to 3 meters in height. One of the primary advantage for CLT is the use of off-site fabrication, and CLT panels are most commonly used for load-bearing walls and floors. Where glulam is an engineered composite product that consists of smaller pieces of stress-graded wood that are adhere or laminated together. Glulam is actually stronger than solid wood, and glulam section can be manufactured or curved or straight, and are commonly available in length up to like 20 meters. So you can imagine that when you use glulam, they can be placed in kind of large span and big open space. And then LVL is more widely used engineered structural composite lumber, and it's actually less popular in recent years. And they're actually used in post, beams, and joist element. So mass timber can be used on its own, or can be used as a hybrid system together with steel or concrete. So when they are used as hybrid structure together with steel and concrete, they can even achieve a larger span or taller buildings. So I'm going to show some examples of bigger buildings. So this is another project in China. It's the Langfang Designers Home in Hebei province in China. Basically, the timber has been used for cladding, for structural elements, and It's actually a two-story building with one basement, total floor area of about 2,500 square meters. It's timber beams and columns designed with charring to achieve 1 hour fire resistant rating. And both the internal and external walls, the load-bearing walls, are protected by plasterboard as fire protection. So the next one, I'm going to go outside China, Hong Kong, and Philippines. Even in Singapore, timber has been quite a focus. This project is the Rivervale Community Club in Singapore. It's currently in construction. It's a new 5-story mixed-use building, which includes seminar rooms, classroom, gymnasium, multi-purpose hall, 90,000 square feet. It used glulam columns and beams with CLT floors and walls. So you can see glulam and CLT are actually very popular modern construction material for timber. Another one is the Singapore Management University connection. It's completed and is currently in use. It's a four-floor glulam and CLT multi-use building, 80,000 square feet. Mass timber building extension to the existing academic building, and it's the first academic mass timber building in Singapore. And if you actually jump outside Asia, you can imagine in Europe and in the UK, Americas, there are even more ambitious timber project constructions. The one shown on screen is the HOT in Amsterdam. It's already, it's due to complete by the end of this year. It's a residential building, 21 stories, 70 meters height. So I'm not going to go more and more. I'm just going to show that you can see from the screen in the last 10 years, from 2013 to these days, you can see that the tallest timber building has been increasingly over the years, starting from a 32 meters building in Melbourne in 2013, and in 2020 or even 2019, we already see timber building completed in Norway, in Vienna, of height up to 85, 84 meters. And if we project from this point onwards, in the future, there's a planned timber structures in Tokyo in it's currently being planned. In 2041, it can go up to about 350 meters. So, and I hopefully by now you can understand that the trend for timber outside Hong Kong is not, no one is going to stop that. It's going to come as time goes by. So as a fire engineer, we need to go back to fundamentals of timber behavior in fire. What are the problems? What are the issues? So let's look at the fundamentals behavior of timber in fire. So some fire dynamics and so on. We have to go. We'll take you through some of the key considerations. So timber burns basically. It's combustible. There's nothing we can do to make timber become non-combustible. So for untreated timber, if you use it for decorations as external cladding or internal decorations, fire can start and spread quite quickly on the surface. So the problem is that when you are using the timber as an external facade, when the fire spread quickly on the surface, the fire can spread from one floor to another. And we hear fire officers, Jill, talk about how bad fire spread was in his presentation earlier. Actually, a lot of the fire become detrimental because of the fast fire spread. So if timbers are not treated, fire can spread quite quickly. But luckily, there are treatment that can be made to timber to make the fire spread become slower. But apart from that, when timber burns, it also forms a layer of charring. So, and then this layer of charring acts as an insulation to the unburned timber underneath it. So this charring is beneficial because of this acting as an insulation, it slowed down the burning and progressions of char underneath. So beyond charring, you have the layer underneath the char, which is heated but not char yet. This layer of timber will lose its property or its ability to take loading. So when it's very hot, this layer of hot timber, which is not char, but it will lose its strength quite completely. And then finally, when you're adding all these decoration structures, everything together, we are adding actually more fire load to the building. Basically, timber will sustain burning. And by having all these timber materials in the compartment fire, the fire will last longer. So these are the fundamental behavior we have to face as a fire engineer on timber fire. So as I said earlier, timber is combustible. We cannot treat timber to achieve non-combustible, such as achieving BS 476 Part 4, but we can slow down the surface spread of flame using fire retardants or impregnations so that it achieve BS 476 Part 6 or Part 7, which is the common requirement in Hong Kong. And when timber burns, we will have to use reuse the char layer for our structures. So timber structural elements are designed by specifying sufficient section sizes so that the remaining timber that are not char and not loose strength are able to accommodate the relevant loading. So this is a good pictures showing on mass timber. You have a char layer, and then you have a zero strength layer, and then beneath the zero strength layer, this is the remaining unaffected timber, where we, as a structural engineer, we will use this layer to take loading, or design this layer to take loading, and that's how structural use of timber are designed in fire. And similar to steel or concrete beams or columns, we do conduct fire testing to verify the performance of timber in fire. Especially there are many suppliers that carry out general tests for their product for different fire rating. And we hear also Dr. Lippman see earlier talk about testing. So if you want to use timber, testing will be a big part of it. Not just the beam columns, but also the connections. Connections is actually very critical for timber buildings, and so a large range of timber types are being tested in test labs. So if you move on to mass timber is even more complicated. The reason is that typically when we consider a fire in a fire compartment, we do not assume a lot of wood or timber to burn. So when we are using mass timbers, actually we are adding more fire load to the fire compartment. So the fire will the temperature in the compartment will actually increase to start with. Sorry, yeah, previous slides. Yeah, the temperature of will actually increase. So the temperatures in the fire compartment will actually increase. And what make it more worse is that because of the laminations of the mass timbers like CLT or glulam, some of the laminations fail, and then we are actually allowing or some of the charring they fall off from the timber, and they're actually adding more exposures to the fire compartment. So you can see that on the chart 2, the red curve. In some of the experiments for CLT, you can see that they are reheating, or the fire actually die down and then go back up again towards the end, because when the charring on the surface fall off, more timber are exposed, and they add fuel to the fire. And then if the glue fail completely, you will get the curve number 3, where it will add more and more heating to the fire, and that become a very hot fire for much longer period. So that's the issue with mass timber for CLT and glulam. And so the failure that I talk about is the glue line integrity failure. So when the glue fail, you have what we call the glue line integrity failure. So if the glue line cannot withstand the heating, excessive amount of char that protect the unburned timber will fall off, allowing fresh timber to be exposed to the fire. This will add more fuel to the fire, leading to cyclic or sustained burning. So the graph on the right-hand side, top right-hand side, you can see that these are taken from real tests. The temperature go up, and then it come down, and then it will go up and down again every time when the layer of CLT or glulam fail. So this is again, so in order to prevent all this happen, we need to fire protect the timber structures, and this is the fire test showing on the left is actually showing where the fire protection fail. You can see that even towards the end of the test, you can see more flames are coming out because of the timber are adding to the fuel. But if we are able to protect the timber structures with complete encapsulations, which is the fire protections, then the fire will be shielded from the timber and provide the fire protections effectiveness to the timber structures. Right. I'm going to lastly jump to regulations and code quickly. I know I haven't got much time. So Hong Kong, I think we are all very familiar of the approval process and so on. So in short, the current Hong Kong code and regulations actually do not allow combustible material or timber to be used in external wall, curtain wall, cladding, or roof. And then for element of constructions, there's actually no restrictions for timber, but apart from asking for the timber to achieve fire resisting rating. But there's no requirements and there's no actually guidance on mass timber construction either. Outside Hong Kong, in the UK, because of the Grenfell fire we heard from Officer Chiu earlier, the regulations in the UK are changing. They are having more stringent requirements on the restrictions on material for external wall, especially for buildings over 18 meters. But for the structures in the UK, the situation is similar to Hong Kong. There's no limitations, and there's lack of guidance on mass timber in fire. IBC in the US for external cladding and combustibles materials are not allowed, and if we are using combustible material, you have to do testing according to NFPA 285. And if you have to test the entire cladding as a system, and in order for the combustible material to be used as external cladding. For structures, the codes are being updated, and in 2015, the IBC, in 2021, IBC 2021 actually make a lot of relaxations for timber. So previously, timbers are only allowed up to 6 stories with a maximum of 85 feet and certain area. But in the 2021 IBC, there are 3 types of construction. You can do it to type 4C, 4B, and 4A. Ultimately, if you do it to 4A, the height can go up to 270 feet, which is about 83 meters, 18 floors, but you have to be fully protected, sprinklers, and so on. So I won't go into too much details because of time. Again, in Singapore, they have changed their regulations and codes. 2014, the Singapore Civil Defense issued circular to allow the use of CLT. And then 2016, they amend the Singapore Fire Code to allow engineered timber like glulam and CLT. But of course, there are lots of requirements together, especially for buildings over 12 meters. Performance-based approach has to be used. China, similarly, we are seeing relaxations in the new code, new fire code developed in or released in 2015. There are new chapters allowing hybrid timber building to be built up to 7 floors or 24 meters. So basically, globally, we can see that outside Hong Kong, the codes are changing. The requirements for external facades or cladding for combustible materials are becoming stricter and stricter. I think mainly because of the fire in Grenfell. But for structures, mass timbers are becoming more and more popular, and codes are being refreshed and reviewed and released to allowing mass timber to be used for taller and larger building. Of course, the fire protections measures, sprinklers, and so on requirements will also be upgraded in all these new allowance. So finally, we as Arab, we know that there's a big knowledge gaps in timber, in fire. So we actually carry out a lot of research internally and also externally. We are currently collaborating with external parties, including the Imperial College, CIRIP in the test lab in France, and also the University of Edinburgh to carry out different research, mainly on the mass timber. And also, as a fire engineer, we actually we think that timber is actually very important because of the sustainable development requirements. As a fire engineer, we have to consider timber, although we have to recognize that timber introduces additional hazard, so we have to address it, and we have to consider the full range of issues from evacuation to fire spread, to external fire spread, structures, and finally how the timber structures can support firefighting and rescue operation. So everything, all these fire safety issues have to be addressed when timbers are introduced into building, and ideally a fire strategy covering all this area is required. So this is my last slide. So as a summary, from the beginning, I talk about timber as a key contributor to net zero because of the sustainable development growth and the drive to reduce carbon footprint or carbon emission. We have to consider timber. As an industry, we have no choice. There's a global push for timber as a construction material, especially for mass timber structures. And over the last few years, 5 to 10 years, we are seeing more and more research and study. So we are gaining more confidence and capacity to address some of the challenges presented by timber. We need industry-wide collaboration. We need our authority to understand, to play a role. We need the testing industry to help to do a lot of tests. We need university to do the research together, and as a fire engineer, we also play part of it. So there's a lot of opportunities and possible solutions, and at the moment we'll be seeing timber as a case-by-case basis in Hong Kong because of the limitations in the codes and structures, codes and regulations. And like what FSD officer Mr. Chiu say, we have to take a holistic approach when we look at timber. Thank you very much. That's all I have to share today. I look forward to discussions and more sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Engineer Dr. Wong. After having 4 insightful presentations, our Q&A session will now begin. I'll pass the time to our section chairman, Engineer Professor Low, to chair the Q&A section. And let's welcome back our speakers, Professor Yu Guanghan, Mr. Chiu Yu Kwok, Dr. Lip Man Si, Engineer Dr. Yang Wong. Engineer Professor Low, over to you.
Thank you. Is Professor Yu there? Okay, let me see. Yes, he's back with us. Thank you. And the other speaker, is it okay? So
Oh,
everything is there.
sorry. I was mute just now. Anyway, greetings from Australia.
Very welcome back. Okay, so we start the Q&A. Yes, the first question I would like to address to Professor Yeo.
Yes.
Yes, it's an interesting paper and a very advanced scientific finding. It's the first time I heard about MCN and chitosan. I know chitin from biology field trip, but chitosan is the first time I heard about it. What is the relationship? How could they help in the product, finalized product and the technology?
Okay, so this is how I will explain it. In terms of the background or what are the nanomaterials you've been very familiar with, for example, like graphene or even the graphite oxide or whatever, you know that all this material has some of this like a 2D structure, right? Okay, 2D structure. And for example, like graphene, you basically like a 2D structure, nano honeycomb structure, basically what graphene and the molecular structure is. So what we have done here is that we have looked at other types of nanomaterials, which are basically sheets, sheet form, sheet-like, okay? So in a way that if you think of a sheet-like materials, it will be basically quite similar like clay materials, like nano clay, right? So in essence, now what you have now that nano clay is basically just like you think about it, it's like a brick, you shrink it to the nanoscale. But for the MXene, what you do is a titanium carbide, you shrink it to the nanoscale level. Now, what happened is because it's a metal and it also has a lot of good ingredients or whatever, we have found that it's the nano clay, the MXene, which is a 2D nano sheets, if you can lay it in a systematic manner, it forms actually a barrier, right? Now, to fill in, to make the barrier, you need to have a glue. And the glue part is a chitosan, okay? So the chitosan itself, in essence, is an extract from prawn shell. So what you do then is that you basically just mix the solution with the MXene, and somehow that MXene now will interlake with each other to form a coating. And that coating is so effective where the MXene itself helps to disperse the heat, while the chitosan holds the materials together to shield it from the external heat as well. If I can put it that way, that's how both of these materials are working. And if you look at what we have managed to produce, even through testing, the flammability actually reduces up to 80%. It's just amazing, you know? And the coating that we actually apply on any polymer substrate, you're talking about roughly 0.5 millimeter thick. That's it. That's about it. You know, so that's where the lightweight comes in, you know, that you can call it the ultra lightweight, if you want to consider it that way. So basically the coating itself of such high thickness, you know, at such small thickness, super thin thickness, you know, allows the shielding to be quite effective. That's basically what the presentation is all about.
Thank you. The next I would like to, can you summarize again the performance of the new product or the technology? And how far do you think you have achieved your objectives?
Okay, so let me answer this in two parts. So this is a very interesting question. In summary, what we have done is that we have managed to prove that these materials work, and also it is the hybrid combination of inorganic and organic thing seems to be a pathway for upscaling. So at this point in time, what I'm actually trying to do is that to try to produce these materials in bulk, okay? So the bulk process is that now I'm trying to look at basically manufacturers actually to make these materials. Chitosan is already available in the market. You know, you can purchase it, you know, in fact, it's just MXene alone. It's got to be to the point where it can be easily accessible, and when you get easily accessible, the cost will come down, okay, and so forth. Okay, then how about putting those two together? The process itself is actually not difficult. It's actually basic. You can either do immersion process or you can do a spraying as well, at the end of the day. So I do see the potential of it coming into the market or basically upscaling within the next 2 years. I'm talking really a short time. It's not like, it'll be the next 7 years or 10 years or so. The formulation is there. The upscaling is in the process, and I do see it coming into the market and hopefully to provide a solution, for fireproofing within the next 2 years or so.
Thank you very much. The next question will address to Mr. Chu. The consequence of failure to comply with continuous compliance of fire safety requirements can lead to cancellation of license. The impact is so significant. How does the trade see this?
Okay, thank you, Chairman. As I said in the presentation, we will strike the balance between the fire safety and the genuine need of the Philippines operations. And we will regularly meet with the applicants or attend meetings in some liaison meetings with the trade and listen to the need and to reveal the mechanisms or requirements as when necessary. Regarding the continuous compliance mechanisms, we in fact, the governments had engaged an outsider consultancy firm to conduct a trade consultation in 2012 prior to the implementation of such mechanisms. And the consultations we include the service provider, the testing lab, the trade association, professional association, even the property management companies or the PV foam manufacturers. We'll see the impact to such mechanisms. The finding of the consultations suggests that the trade are generally welcomed to our initiative to raise the awareness of the fire safety issues, and the continuous compliance mechanism would not cause a significant impact on the business operations of the trade. So in fact, we have a full consultation with the trade prior to the implementation of such mechanisms. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Another question will be, with reference to slide 15, some scholars point out that BS 476 is outdated. An updated standard test for assessing fire behavior of materials should be properly reviewed. What is your comment on this?
Regarding the standards, we have already stated in various funds that apart from this prescriptive standards we use in the fire safety requirements, we also accept equivalent international standard or national standards which meets the required level of fire safety. And on the other hand, we will keep reviewing or monitoring the development of the standards and local market availabilities. We will discuss or consult with relevant professional, academics, and the trade from time to time when we see whether the updated or the outdated requirements are needed to be revealed from time to time. And for the application results, we will see the applicants to submit the relevant test report or test cert, and we will assess it, the fire safety standards on a case-by-case merit.
Okay, thank you. What follow will be a question for Dr. C. In the product certification, is the manufacturing process so important that due monitoring or even certification needed? Comment on how the manufacturing process would affect the product performance and also for fire safety.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Professor Low. Yeah. So for these questions, actually, in our previous practice, usually the product will be submitted by the manufacturer, and then the submitted product will be conduct the test. So that as long as the product is actually submitted by the manufacturer, so when they manufacturing this product, maybe they will use more effort or use more better quality raw material to manufacturing the product that's for the testing. So that sometimes during the mass production, they may use some kind of raw material that may be not as good as the test one, and also the manufacturing process may be different, because during the mass production usually the manufacturing process is quite standardized. So that in such case that I believe that due to this reason, the products that manufacturing during the mass production will be slightly different from the fire test actually, so that the quality may not be as good as the product that's submitted for the test. So that in order to rectify this, the implementation of the product certification scheme is quite important, so that to make sure that the products in the market they are achieving quite a consistent quality, and also to avoid some kind of issue about the very large deviation of the quality of the products. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Dr. Wong, yeah, there's a question from the audience to you. Lecture timber is not monolithic. Their strength differ vastly by type. So, do they have standard stress or strength curves like other materials such as steel? How do structural engineers deal with this when designing timber structure? How to convince the authority?
Okay, thank you for the questions, and thank you, Professor, for helping to relay the questions. Yeah, I think I'm not sure whether the question is related to fire or kind of a
general. I think it's more on structural engineering.
Yeah, so I think there are many structural engineers here. I'm not definitely not chartered structural engineers. So with my very limited knowledge on structures, I believe structural timber design is a very old profession, and there are standard codes and ways to test and to get the material strength and to verify it and to get them to be used as structural timber. And for fire, the added difficulty is we need to understand or know the charring rate. So when we do structural fire design, the additional steps as a fire or as a structural engineer need to do is to specify or assign a charring rate, and this charring rate has to come from the supplier. And commonly we know the common charring rate of common timber, but I think currently it's quite common for the supplier to use their product to put in a test lab to verify the charring rate of the timber that's supplied. Because when you add to more complicated, is the glue lam, CLT, and so on, it's not simply the timber species, it's also the glue and how the whole system, when they glue together, behave in fire. So I understand in Australia or in the UK or Europe, we are always relying on the manufacturer to produce the test certificate and test evidence that these timber, glue lam or CLT achieve the charring performance as they claim.
Okay, thank you. There are another question, but I will skip the structural part. It's mentioned how the performance of connections under fire. What's your concern on the connection, especially the timber structures?
Yes, of course. I think structures. We all know that structures are very important. If the structure fail, there could be catastrophic. Yes. So again, if we are using very common type of connections that are widely already available in the code, then we can simply follow the code approach to design the timber connections. And again, as I understand, this is a subject where there's a lot of knowledge gap. So I know currently there are a lot of tests being done by researchers on timber connections, and especially when they are connected to steels or concrete and so on. More importantly, I think this is also recognized by the code. So I mentioned earlier, IBC now allows taller buildings of timber to be used. But if you look into details, a fully exposed timber, you can only design up to 9 stories. Beyond that, for 12 stories or 18 floors, the code require all the timber, actually especially for 4A, which is up to between 12 and 18 floors, the code require all the timber to be non-exposed. So basically, you'll be doing encapsulation, protecting all the timber and the timber connections from any possible fire. So that's why they call it encapsulation. It's like a blanket containing or shielding the timber from the effects of heat. So especially if you're going to very big, tall building with complex connection, I would say the current solution is to put fire protection using encapsulations to make sure there's no heating in the connections, rather than trying to come up with a clever way to allow the connection to be exposed, unless we are doing a lot of testing to verify the performance. Currently, there's no way to kind of guarantee the performance in fire.
Okay, thank you. However, have a more general question on the use of timber. Timber is of low carbon footprint in production, of course, but cutting down trees for timber is not environmental friendly in reducing the atmosphere carbon content. How do you comment on that?
Yeah, well, again, I'm not a climate expert. I'm also learning, but my understanding these days in South Australia, in the US, and also in Europe, the source of timber is very important. When the client go for timber, they always demand sustainable timber, which the timber come from certified forests, where they cut down the trees that will regrow, and there are systematic way to make the timber supply sustainable, and if the supply of the timber come from, it's not certified, the reputable supplier will not use them. So I think this timber certification is quite common these days, yes. And it's one of the kind of first question you ask when you go for timber.
That means when you want to build more timber structure, you have to ensure that you have the plentiful supply of timber. It's not a threat to the cutting down of the trees.
Correct, yes. And I believe there's a very large supplier responsible for that. And I know in Canada, for example, in Europe, there are lots of sustainable woods that you can source from. But of course, they are more expensive than the non-certified timber. But we're not talking about cutting costs here, so we're talking about carbon reduction.
Okay. Yes, we still have some time. May I ask a question of Mr. Chiu? Yes. Material in compliance with code doesn't mean that there is no potential risk for premises. You mentioned that lavishly decorated. Is there any limit to the quantity of combustible material in your license? And then if a large amount of such material exists, how you can handle it?
Okay. In fact, in processing the license applications, we define the lavished decorated premises refer to the premises involve a large quantity of combustible materials in the sitting accommodations with the following conditions. One, the average quantity of the combustible materials in the sitting accommodation exceeds 60 kg per meter squares. Two, the combustible materials used for the foreseeing in factory contain or in more than 30%, more than 30% of the sitting accommodation are patinated by combustible materials. In fact, the operators or the applicants of the previous license are well familiar with our requirements. And the first two conditions is not very commonly seen in the applications. And for the third conditions, which is involving the combustible material used as the partitions, we will quite familiar to set, and we will put some additional fire safety requirements to them. For example, an additional sprinkler system or fire hydrant hose bill. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. My last question is for Dr. Wong. Yes. Timber is combustible. No treatment enable timber to pass non-combustible tests. This is your mention in your slides. How about coated the lower part of the timber column with metal sheet or other materials to prevent direct contact with fire? And should it be more fire resistant?
Yep, thank you, Professor. Yes, of course, fire protections can be added on the surface of timber. Metal sheet may still conduct a lot of heat, so may not be, well, perhaps behind the metal sheet, you probably another layer of rock wool or something to provide the insulation, then that's possible. Or you can simply use plasterboard or something to kind of encapsulate the surface of the timber so that the timber structure are not affected by heat. So that is actually the first solution that we can provide to timber protection structures. Yeah.
So is it possible?
Yes,
okay,
definitely.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we have now come to the end. Is the time's up? So stop.
Thank you, Engineer Professor Low and speakers. This marks the end of the morning section. We will now take a lunch break. We will resume the afternoon session here at 10 past 2 p.m. 10 past 2 p.m. Thank you for your attention and enjoy.